The philosophy of fear is a rich and multi-faced subject that has intrigued scholars, thinkers, and artists for centuries. It delves into the human experience, exploring how fear shapes our perceptions, actions, and understanding of existence. Fear is a primal emotion, yet its implications extend far beyond immediate survival instincts, influencing moral, existential, and metaphysical reflections. This essay seeks to explore the philosophy of fear from various perspectives, engaging with historical, psychological, existential, and ethical frameworks to understand its role in human life. Fear is often considered one of the most fundamental human emotions. It is a natural response to perceived threats, whether physical, social, or psychological. Evolutionarily speaking, fear serves as a protective function, altering individuals to danger and preparing the body to fight, flee, or freeze. However, in the context of philosophy, fear takes a deeper significance. It is not merely an instinctual reaction, but a complex emotion and cognitive state that engages with our sense of self, our place in the world, and the nature of existence itself. The philosophy of fear therefore involves investigating how fears function not just as a biological reaction, but as a social, ethical, and metaphysical force that shapes our lives. Fear is not only a response to immediate danger, but also a driving force behind many human behaviors, from the desire for safety to the pursuit of meaning and truth. One of the most profound philosophical engagements with fear comes from the existential tradition, particularly in the works of thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard, Martin Heidegger, and Jean-Paul Sartre. Existential philosophers argue that fear is intimately connected with the human experience of freedom, choice, and responsibility. Soren Kierkegaard's work, Fear and Trembling, offers one of the earliest and the most influential philosophical reflections on fear. For Kierkegaard, fear is central to the human experience, especially in relation to faith and the individual's relationship with the divine. In this text, he uses the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac to explore the tension between faith and reason. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son, Isaac, at God's command is seen as an expression of faith that transcends rational understanding. Kierkegaard introduces the concept of fear and trembling as the emotional response to the paradox of faith. The fear in question is not the fear of physical danger, but a fear of the unknown, of the absurdity of existence, and one of personal responsibility that comes from making choices in a world that may seem indifferent or even hostile. Fear is existential in nature, a recognition of the limits of human understanding and the weight of individual responsibility. For Martin Heidegger, fear is a key concept in the analysis of being, particularly in his magnum opus, Being and Time. Heidegger distinguishes between two types of fear: the fear of specific, external threats and more fundamental fear related to human existence itself, which he calls angst or anxiety. This form of anxiety is not tied to a particular object but arises from an awareness of nothingness of existence. Heidegger argues that anxiety reveals to us the groundless nature of our existence, the fact that we are thrown into a world without a clear purpose or guarantee of meaning. This existential fear is what allows individuals to confront their own mortality and fragility of their own existence. It is, paradoxically, through experiencing fear and anxiety that we come to understand the truth of our being. And it's only by confronting this fear that we can live authentically. Jean-Paul Sartre takes a slightly different approach to the fear in his philosophy of existentialism. For Sartre, fear is closely tied to the human condition of radical freedom. In Being and Nothingness, he argues that humans are condemned to be free, and with this freedom comes the responsibility to make choices that define who we are. This freedom can be both liberating and terrifying. Fear, for Sartre, emerges from the awareness of one's own freedom and the realization that one's actions define their existence. Fear is not just a result of external threats, but the internal terror of confronting the vast possibilities of human existence and the burden of responsibility that comes with choice. Sartre suggests that people often flee from this existential anxiety by adopting pre-given roles or societal norms, which provide a sense of security and meaning. However, true freedom involves embracing the fear that comes with acknowledging the responsibility of their existence. Fear also plays a significant role in ethical philosophy, particularly in discussions about security, authority, and social contracts. From Thomas Hobbes to Michel Foucault, thinkers have examined how fear shapes our political and moral systems. Thomas Hobbes, in his work Leviathan, famously argued that fear is the foundation of political authority. According to Hobbes, in the state of nature, Humans are driven by fear of violence and death, and this fear leads them to form social contracts to create powerful, sovereign authority. The fear of the chaos and violence inherent in the state of nature compels individuals to submit to a higher power that can ensure their safety and security. Hobbes's view suggests that the fear is a central force in the creation of organized society and government. Without fear of violent death or suffering, there would be no compelling reasons for individuals to relinquish their freedoms and submit to political authority. For Hobbes, fear is both a destructive and constructive force. It motivates individuals to seek protection, but also allows for the formation of institutions that maintain social order. Michel Foucault offers a more critical perspective on fear in his analysis of power and control. In his works, particularly Discipline and Punish, Foucault examines how fear is used as a tool of social control. He argues that modern societies do not rely on overt violence to maintain order, but instead use fear as a mechanism of discipline. Institutions like schools, prisons, and hospitals instill fear in individuals, shaping their behavior and conformity through surveillance and the internalization of norms. Foucault's concept of panopticon, a design for a prison in which inmates are always visible to the central watchtower, serves as a metaphor for the way modern societies use fear to regulate behavior. The fear of being watched, of being judged or punished, is a constant presence, even in the absence of direct coercion. Fear in this sense becomes internalized, with individuals policing their own behavior in response to the potential threat of surveillance. Beyond its ethical and existential dimensions, fear is also tied to metaphysical questions, particularly the fear of death. The fear of human death has been the central theme in philosophy since the time of ancient Greeks. In ancient philosophy, fear of death was seen as one of the greatest obstacles in living a virtuous life. Socrates, in Plato's Apology, dismisses the fear of death, arguing that no one knows what happens after death, and that it should not be feared. For Socrates, fear of death is irrational because it is based on ignorance. He suggests that the philosopher who seeks wisdom and understanding should not fear death, as it may be a release from the trials of life. The Stoics, including Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, also emphasize the importance of overcoming the fear of death. They argue that death is a natural part of existence and that it should not be feared because it is beyond human control. Instead, the Stoics advocate for focusing on what is within one's control, such as virtue and wisdom, rather than dwelling on things like death that are far beyond our influence. As we saw with Heidegger, death is a central concern in existential philosophy. For Heidegger, the fear of death is a confrontation with the finitude of human existence. However, rather than retreating from this fear, Heidegger argues that we must embrace it as a way of living authentically. He refers to beingness as being towards death, a recognition that death is inevitable, and that our awareness of it gives meaning to our lives. Heidegger suggests that only by facing the reality of death can individuals live fully. The fear of death forces us to confront the fact that our lives are finite and that we are responsible for how we live them. In this sense, the fear of death can be seen as a motivator for authentic existence, propelling us to live meaningfully and make the most of our limited time. The philosophy of fear is a complex and multifaceted field that touches on a wide range of human concerns, from the nature of existence to political authority and ethical living. Fear, while often seen as something to avoid or overcome, is an essential part of the human condition, shaping how we interact with the world and make sense of our place in it. Philosophers like Kierkegaard, Heidegger, Sartre, Hobbes, and Foucault have shown that fear is not simply a negative emotion. By confronting fear, whether it be the fear of death, the fear of freedom, or the fear of the unknown, individuals can move beyond mere survival and live authentically. Fear in this sense can be a source of strength, clarity, and personal growth, offering a deeper understanding of who we are and how we relate to the world around us. In the end, the philosophy of fear teaches us that fear, though uncomfortable and sometimes paralyzing, is a fundamental aspect of what it means to be human. By engaging with fear rather than avoiding it, we may find the courage to confront the deepest questions of existence and discover new ways to live more fully.